Now we've got the Democratic nominee for the governor of New Jersey, Mikie Sherrill. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, first off, congratulations on the primary win. We are now heading toward the general election. But I just want to zoom out for a moment here. We recently saw Donald Trump send ICE into Los Angeles, which is the city that I live in. That, of course, sparked protest because this is a city that's composed of a third immigrants. And he used that as a pretense to then be able to send in the Marines and federalize the National Guard. And so this is happening because, California, Los Angeles, this is a blue city in a blue state with a blue governor that Donald Trump likes to use as a punching bag. New Jersey is another true blue state. And so if and when this happens in New Jersey, what will your response be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just speaking to a friend of mine in LA who was working about a block from the ICE detention facility or the ICE center where the troops are on the street. And she was saying she's getting these calls from all over the country to commiserate with her about how horrible it is. And she said, we're not seeing the things on the street that Fox News is doing. The really scary part, though, is that we have armed troops in our streets, which, of course, is not the appropriate use of armed forces unless
Right.
it's in the most extreme moment, right? And she
Which,
said,
which, by the way, is exactly what the police chief of the LAPD, which isn't exactly some liberal,
right,
not known to be some
right.
liberal force, has said as well.
Well, and what she was saying too is it seems as if it's creating a lot more work for the LAPD because now the LAPD are protecting the National Guard because those people in the street are very concerned. So they're coming out. So now the LAPD has more people out in the street so that they can ensure that there's that nobody, approaches the National Guard now. And so it's sort of, you have these layers of ICE who are armed people, and then you have the National Guard armed against ICE, and then you have the LAPD as a layer. It just starts to be chaos, which is exactly what the president wants and isn't an appropriate use, I would say, again, of armed troops, which is why as governor, I would really stand strongly against that, using the court systems to get them out of there. I think it's illegal what the president's doing. I would be working to hold him accountable for that. There is not an insurrection going on in the streets of LA right now. So he should not be using the Insurrection Act. He's not really delineated very well what he's doing. In fact, when Pete Hegseth was asked why he wanted to put Marines on the street, under what authority, he said the Constitution. He was asked what part of the Constitution. This is a document we use as a legal framework. It's not just a vibes document. We don't just say
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like the vibe of the Constitution. He couldn't say what it was. So this is an administration that's out of control, that is trying to utilize power in inappropriate ways. And as governor, I'd hold them accountable.
If you look back to 2020, Donald Trump had an instance where he tried to seize voting machines to do God knows what with, but he had no way to actually effectuate this plan. Is there some concern that by using, ICE or protests as a pretense to be able to send in the military to American cities, that he will then have soldiers at his disposal to be able to effectuate plans that he might not have been successful with in 2020, but clearly had some interest in doing?
Oh, I have incredible concerns in this space. And I'll tell you why. I'm a military veteran. I'm a former Navy helicopter pilot. I've served and been stationed all over the world. I've served in countries where they don't have the rule of law for the people, where people just answer to the autocrat in charge. And so if you speak out against the person in power, you can be disappeared. I have had calls to my office about with families trying to look for people. There are people being picked up without charges. It does not end with people on green cards. This certainly starts to morph into people being detained if they just speak out against the government. So, what I worry about, to your point, is things like this now seems as if the president is training law enforcement, ICE, for example, to not follow the law and the Constitution, but simply follow his orders. This is now an instance which admirals and generals have spoken out from multiple administrations. Even generals who worked for Donald Trump have spoken out to say, look, this is an inappropriate use of the military in his first administration, because, again, the military should be following the law and the Constitution and not simply the president. It's why you saw General Milley, who worked for Trump in his first administration, you saw him passionately talk about a nation of laws and the Constitution, how everyone takes an oath to the Constitution, not the president. So I think you are exactly right. This presents this to me is a president attempting to create a personal militia of the United States Armed Forces. We saw it, he tried to do it in his first administration. He was largely unsuccessful because at that time the admirals and generals pushed back so hard. But then we saw people on the streets during COVID. If you recall, they were guarding different monuments. They didn't have insignia. They had their faces hidden. They were not answering where they came from. We think it might have
Yeah.
been Department of Correction. So he's again attempting to create this militia. And then we saw January 6th with an insurrection. So again and again and again, we've seen a president trying to create a personal militia. And as we've seen him usurp power in so many different ways, having an armed militia at his fingertips is very, very dangerous.
I want to switch gears a little bit here because Republicans right now are trying to usher through the budget bill that would strip healthcare away from 14 million Americans by cutting Medicaid, that would cut food stamps to the tune of $300 billion, that would explode the deficit. Estimates are between $3 and $5 trillion, all at the hands of the fiscal conservatives and the GOP. What would this do to the folks in New Jersey?
This completely upends the model of the United States, the American dream, if you will, the idea of presenting opportunity to the middle class. And it certainly would do that in New Jersey. It would raise costs on housing because this is going to borrow trillions of dollars in debt if this passes, which would raise interest rates and the cost of borrowing. It would raise costs power. We're seeing in the Northeast, this bill would raise cost of power in the Northeast by $100 per family, for example. It raises costs on 80% of Americans while just funneling money to the top 20%. It's really a shocking change in this American ideal we've had of creating opportunity for as many people as possible, investing in the middle class. This simply creates an economy that we just haven't seen here in recent times since the robber baron days. And I think I'll just tell you what this looks like because it tracks with my own family. My family lost everything in the Great Depression, and they were out of a job. They moved in with, when my grandfather was little, he moved in with his grandparents. They had nothing. He got a union job after FDR expanded the economy to create opportunity. And because of that, placed my family squarely in the middle class. That's why I think I'm in Congress. So this is a total reshaping of the American economy, taking away money and economic opportunity from the middle class.
So we have New Jersey is one of two states, New Jersey and Virginia, that have off-year gubernatorial elections. So your election is coming up in November. This is a state that we generally think of as a true blue state, but Trump only lost to Kamala, I think it was 46-52 in this last election cycle. So there's been some shift to the right. And so for a lot of these folks who have left the Democratic Party or who may have voted for Barack Obama or Joe Biden and then opted to vote for Trump, what's your plan to get those people back?
Yeah, so I think what New Jerseyans want to see is well-run, efficient government and protection of rights and freedoms. And while they see everything coming from Washington and Donald Trump as an attack on rights and freedoms, an attack on the economy of New Jersey, and we have a Republican, Jack Ciattarelli, who's running basically to, saying he's going to be, whatever Trump wants, he's going to do. Right. He's been in lockstep.
That's usually how it works in the GOP. There's usually not much space between Trump and the candidates. Yeah,
exactly. And so you see what New Jerseyans want is a real pathway forward for a more affordable New Jersey. New Jersey has gotten completely unaffordable, and we're just not addressing some of the nuts and bolts of how we deliver for the middle class. So by that, I mean, we've got to build more houses. Affordability is just unattainable for so many people. And the thing I hear the most about is the cost of mortgages, the cost of rents. It's gone up by about 50% over the past 5 years in the state. We see utility prices going up 20% this summer, and our healthcare system is going up every single year and has gone up exponentially for working families. So all these costs are making it really difficult. That's why I've run an affordability agenda on how I'm going to build houses, on how I'm going to drive utility costs down, fix the broken healthcare system. And I will tell you both the idea of affordability and standing up against Trump and Washington and the attacks on rights and freedoms in the economy has been very compelling because we saw record level turnout in this Democratic primary. We set records. To give you a sense of what that looks like, last year in the presidential primary, you would have thought that would have been the larger number. 550,000 roughly Dems showed up. In this one, 825,000. So it's a scale like we've never seen. And compare and contrast that with the Republican turnout. They had a contested primary election. Only about half that, about 400,000 people showed up. So I think that shows that this path forward on wanting people to have the constitutional protections, legal protections, a state of laws, a state of making sure people's rights and freedoms are protected, while at the same time relentlessly focused on driving down costs and really truly making Trenton work for people. That is a compelling message. That's what the people of New Jersey want to see. And I think that's really going to set the table well for what people, I think, across the country want to see.
Does New Jersey fit into the Ezra Klein abundance discourse that we've been speaking about, where really the biggest impediment to being able to build in these states and cities that are controlled by Democrats is the fact that we have so much bureaucracy standing in the way of actually being able to get anything done, to the point where it takes years to get through these environmental reviews that are well intentioned, but the net result of them is that we actually end up not being able to do anything, which reflects poorly on Democratic governance, and then Democrats have trouble making the case to people to even stay in office or get elected, because when you look at the ways in which Democratic policies that again may have been well-meaning are impeding our ability to be able to govern, then that really doesn't send the right message.
Yes, and it's those policies that are impeding innovation and moving forward, but it's also those policies that are then enabling every little group that doesn't want something to happen to shut it all down.
Yeah.
At the expense of the whole. So
what would be your plan to confront something like that?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I am pledging to do, to go in and to disrupt some of these laws and regulations that have been on the books for years that are holding things up. Having all of my commissioners, which are like cabinet members at the federal level, so that commissioners of education and labor and transportation coming and saying, here, this week, here are the 5 regulations that make no sense this week that we're going to start to clean up, and we're going to keep doing. So across the board, that's hundreds a week that we're really just starting to clean up, and then driving down time, having a dashboard for when you're going to get through the permitting process. So right now there's zero transparency. So you submit a permit, you have set up your restaurant, you've hired people because you have to have the whole thing ready to go by the time you apply for the permit. You're paying rent on the space you're occupying as you want to open up, and you're just bleeding money as you're waiting to get through permitting, and you have no idea how long it's going to take. And so I will have a dashboard so you can look in and say, oh, I'm almost here. And then as governor, I can say, why are all the permits getting stuck right here in this space, and push through it. And honestly, you just look next door in Pennsylvania, another state run by a Democratic governor. They have got the permitting times down for small business by 90%. So this is something that I can take on very quickly and start to drive in results very quickly.
Okay. And then you had also mentioned healthcare. I mean, it feels like it's very convenient to be able to say to bring down healthcare costs. And so what would a plan be in order to be able to do that? And what would you focus on specifically? And I'm the kid of 2 registered nurses who work in healthcare in New Jersey. And so I'm just particularly interested in this.
Yeah. So it starts with getting an independent auditor into the state health benefits plan. That could save money and also give ideas of how we start to attack and address some of the lack of transparency in the plan, lack of cost transparency as we're trying to advocate for different procedures, where the costs are coming from, how we drive those down. But also taking on the PBMs. Those are the middlemen in pharmaceutical costs that can drive up pharmaceutical drugs up to 10 times, for example. That's where it starts. I do worry very much right now because as we are seeing our state health benefits plan in New Jersey really needing to be addressed because it's not in a good place right now, we're also seeing the attacks from the federal government on Medicare and Medicaid possibly coming in this bill. So a lot of that, too, is going to have to be reckoned with. So you have a teetering health system, and then you have the federal government attacking healthcare. So those are 2 perfect storms that are going to take a lot of work. That's why, as governor, should they try to stop paying into Medicare and Medicaid in the state, I'm going to take them to court. work with other Democratic governors to start to claw back that federal money. Because here's the thing. New Jersey sends $70 billion more to the federal government than we get back. Yeah. Our whole state budget is $58 billion. We send $70 billion more to Washington, D.C. than we get returned to us. And so we really need that money to run these programs, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, Department of Ed funding, National Institute of Health funding, et cetera. And so if the federal government's not going to run these programs that they're on the hook for, then we shouldn't be paying into these programs that they're not running anymore. We need that money back in New Jersey so we can begin to run these programs ourselves.
And that's similar to what Gavin Newsom said from here in California, where he threatened not to pay into the federal government if the federal government is not going to uphold its end of the bargain. Two quick questions on that is, would you join into that effort, and do you think it would hold up to legal scrutiny?
Yes, I'm going to join in that effort. And if this bill passes and they stop running these programs, 100% I'm getting involved in that legal effort. And that's what we're going to find out, because I am running as governor in this time with these attacks from the federal government to take a very broad view of state power in the way that we see Trump trying to usurp so much federal power.
Which, by the way, used to be a Republican position way back when they were states' rights defenders.
I know, exactly. And we'll see if they still hold true to it. I have some doubts. But we are in a federalist system. And so we're seeing that with the Senate and the House, they've been completely acquiescing to Donald Trump in a really dangerous way. So the other check on expansive, centralized power, it's the states right now. And so we really need to utilize that, as many of the founding fathers would have envisioned, to expand state power to push back against someone who is trying to really consolidate power in an anti-democratic way. This is another check on that kind of unmitigated power that Trump is trying to accrue to himself.
And finally, let's finish off with this, because I have to make sure that I speak up for my people. And so I have to ask, does Central Jersey exist?
So I have been to many places in Central Jersey. My daughter's going to kill me because she's on the other side of this fight. But I will tell you, there's a lot going on there. If you haven't been back recently, you should come see us again. And then I am going to have to put a plug in, or I'm going to get killed by my people on my campaign, to please ask if you're interested in this, if you want to see what we're building here in the state, if you want to get involved, please go to MikieSherrill.com. We are really building I call it a juggernaut of a campaign in New Jersey, because I think this is how we set the table for moving forward in a different way in this country than we see coming from Washington. I think it starts here in New Jersey. At being a good Jersey boy, I'm sure you'll understand, as the center of the universe, we are starting it right here, and we are going to move forward in a different kind of way. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Of course. And just a reminder for everybody watching that this is one of two states that has off-year elections, and having a big win in New Jersey in November of this year will give Democrats the momentum as we head into midterms in 2026. So I'm going to put the link to your website right here on the screen and also in the post description. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm going to put it in the show notes of this episode. Mikie Sherrill, thank you so much for taking the time. Best of luck in the campaign trail.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Take care.